The envoy's name was Kaylee, and she was not supposed to be here. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the smooth metal door before her. The corridors of the human starship still felt strange to her. Everything was wider, brighter, and warmer than on her homeworld. The air even smelled different, carrying a faint sharpness from the recycled oxygen systems the humans used. She had been told to stay with the other delegates from her people, the Vayari, while humans prepared rooms for their guests. But curiosity had always been Kaylee's weakness. She was young, chosen for this mission because of her quick mind and eagerness to learn. Yet now, that eagerness had taken her further than she intended. She had wandered down a wrong hallway. She had counted the doors, thought she was heading back to the gathering chamber, but her path had twisted. She pressed the door control, expecting to find perhaps another storage bay, or maybe the meeting lounge. Instead, the door slid open with a hiss, and there, inside the softly lit chamber, she froze. On a wide bed, under no protective shield, without armor, without weapons, lay a human soldier. He was asleep. Kaylee's first thought was disbelief. Her people never rested in such a way. A Vayari warrior would never remove their protective layers, not even in their most private chambers. A Vayari leader would never allow a guard to sleep so defenseless. Yet this human lay on his back, chest rising and falling slowly, eyes closed, mouth relaxed. He wore nothing, no layers of defense, no sign of readiness. Kaylee's second thought was that this must be a trap. Perhaps he only pretended to sleep. Perhaps he waited for an intruder to test him. But as her eyes adjusted to the soft glow, she saw the truth. His breathing was steady, his body completely relaxed, the way only true sleep could make it. Her heart pounded. She stepped inside before she even thought about what she was doing. The room itself was strange to her. Human chambers were not like Vayari quarters. The walls had pictures, flat displays of stars, landscapes, and oceans. A faint sound played, from a small device like moving air mixed with the sound of distant rain. The air was warmer here than in the halls, comfortable for a resting body. And still, at the center of it all, the human slept. Kaylee had been taught that humans were dangerous. Their bodies looked soft, but their history was full of violence, survival, and stubborn victories. Their hands, their eyes, their voices, everything about them carried force. To see one so vulnerable felt like staring at something impossible. She inched closer. Her feet made no sound on the padded floor. She studied him carefully. His hair was short, darker than most of her people's, and his face seemed calmer than the sharp, fierce looks humans usually carried. His chest rose and fell, with steady rhythm. The strange thing was not his body, but the trust he showed. He trusted the walls, trusted the silence, trusted that no one would harm him here. The thought unsettled her. On her homeworld, no one trusted silence. No one trusted walls. Every Vayari slept with one eye half open, armor never far from reach. Even children learned to wake at the faintest sound, for predators or rivals could strike at any moment. To her people, being defenseless was worse than foolish. It was an invitation for death. Yet here was this human breaking every rule she had ever known. She felt the need to leave, to turn around before anyone caught her in this private place. But before she could move, the human stirred. Kaylee froze. His eyes opened slowly. They were not sharp with suspicion nor full of fear. Instead, he blinked, looked at her, and smiled faintly, as if this were nothing more than a small surprise. "You're not supposed to be here," he said in a calm, tired voice. Kaylee stiffened. Her people would have leapt to defend themselves, reaching for weapons or calling guards. But he only spoke, his tone soft, almost amused. Her throat felt dry. She had practiced human language, but now her words stumbled. "I lost the way. I thought, this hall leads to the gathering chamber." The human yawned, stretching one arm before sitting up slightly. "You're a Vayari, right? One of the envoys?" She nodded quickly, feeling heat rise in her face. "Don't worry. These ships can be confusing," he said. "You're not the first to end up where you didn't mean to." His calmness disarmed her more than anger ever could. Kaylee tilted, her head, curiosity pushing past her embarrassment. "You were Sleeping? Yeah. He smiled again, as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. Without armor, without guards, without anything. She could not stop herself from pointing it out. The human chuckled. Well, yeah, it's my room, safe place. Her voice grew firmer. But it is not safe. This ship could be attacked. Enemies could find you, even I. I walked inside without challenge. For a moment, he studied her with thoughtful eyes. Then he shrugged. If someone attacks, I'll deal with it. Until then, I rest. That's what sleep is for. His words struck her. Sleep was for survival, yes, but never for rest. Not in the way he meant it. For her people, sleep was a guarded state, a light doze, never fully letting go. But this human spoke of letting himself be vulnerable, trusting others, trusting the walls, trusting something unseen. You do not fear weakness, she asked softly. He shook his head. Not weakness, just part of being alive. You can't fight every moment. Sometimes you have to let yourself stop. Silence filled the room, heavy with meaning. Kaylee's heart beat fast, and she realized this conversation was already more than just a mistake. It was a glimpse into something alien, something dangerous, in its own way. The human leaned back, pulling a thin sheet over himself, still relaxed. Don't worry. You didn't offend me. But next time, try knocking. Kaylee blinked at the word. Knocking, asking for entry before walking into a room. Another strange human custom. She nodded, slowly stepping backward. Her mind was a storm of thoughts. She had come here by mistake, but what she had seen and heard would stay with her far longer than this awkward moment. For the first time in her life, she had seen someone who did not guard against weakness. Someone who trusted enough to be vulnerable. And that, she realized, might be the most dangerous thing of all. As the door closed behind her, Kaylee's chest tightened with a feeling she could not name. Fear, admiration, curiosity, perhaps all three. And she knew this was only the beginning. Kaylee did not sleep that night. Back in the chamber the humans had given her, she sat upright on the edge of her bed. The human ship was quiet around her, its engines humming faintly like a giant creature breathing. She thought of her people back, on the Vayari homeworld, her family, her mentors, her elders. If she told them what she had seen, they would not believe her. A warrior, asleep, unarmed, naked, without guards. It was madness in Vayari culture, but she had seen it with her own eyes. And the strangest part was not his state of weakness, it was the calmness in his face when he looked at her. No fear, no shame, no anger. Just a quiet smile, as though she were no threat at all. Kaylee's mind swirled with questions. What kind of people could live like this? How had they survived the endless dangers of the galaxy if they could rest so openly? Or was this the reason they had survived? When the morning cycle lights brightened across the ship, she rose and decided she would see him again. The human's name, she learned, was Marcus Hale. He was not only a soldier, but one of the senior defenders on this vessel. His record was long. He had served on dangerous outposts, fought against raiders, and survived battles where others had fallen. Humans spoke his name with respect, though he did not seem to carry himself with pride. When Kaylee entered the training hall later that cycle, she found him there. This time he was clothed, dark human garments meant for practice, not armor. His skin glistened with sweat as he lifted weights that looked heavy even to her eyes. Every motion was steady, controlled. Around him, other humans trained, some sparring with sticks, others running, others practicing hand-to-hand strikes. The room was alive with noise, laughter, and challenge. Kaylee stood at the doorway watching. Marcus noticed her almost at once. He set the weight aside, wiped his forehead with a towel, and walked toward her with a relaxed smile. "Ah, the midnight visitor," he said. Kaylee felt her throat tighten, but she held her ground. "I apologize again. It was not my intention to enter without permission." He waved off her apology. "No harm done. You seemed more scared than I was." That was true, and it unsettled her again. Why had he not been alarmed? Why had he not called guards? Kaylee tilted her head. "You trust easily." Marcus chuckled. Not easily. But I knew you weren't here to harm me. If you had been, you wouldn't have hesitated. Besides, he tapped his chest lightly. I've been through worse. I can handle myself. Kaylee studied his eyes. They were steady, holding no arrogance, only quiet certainty. Her people called this kind of confidence death blindness. It was the foolish belief that one could not be harmed. But when she looked at Marcus, she did not see blindness. She saw something else. Strength, yes. But also faith. You are strange, she said finally. Strange? Marcus grinned. Coming from someone with silver eyes and skin that changes shade depending on the light, I'll take that as a compliment. Her cheeks flushed dark blue. She did not mean to insult, but humans often twisted words into jokes. Later, when the training hall grew quieter, Marcus sat on a bench and motioned for her to sit beside him. Kaylee hesitated, but then joined him, her curiosity too strong. You were surprised last night, Marcus said. I could see it in your face. Yes, Kaylee admitted. Where I come from, no warrior rests without armor. We do not leave ourselves defenseless. To do so is to invite death. Marcus nodded slowly. Makes sense, you live with different dangers, different history. But here's the thing about humans. We can't stay awake forever. We can't wear armor every moment. If we tried, we'd burn out. That's why we rest. That's why we trust each other to guard when we sleep. Kaylee's brows furrowed. But what if the guard fails? What if the walls break? What if… Marcus cut her off gently. Then we deal with it. We don't waste every moment fearing what might happen. Fear can keep you alive, but it can also kill you if it rules your life. Kaylee was silent. His words carried weight. For her people, fear was survival. To live without it was unthinkable. Yet Marcus spoke as though fear was only a tool, not a master. You call this trust, she whispered. Yes, Marcus said simply. Trust in our crew. Trust in ourselves. Trust that even if something happens, we'll rise again. The more Kaylee spoke with him, the more unsettled she became. And yet, she could not stop. His perspective was like a star she had never seen. Before strange, blinding, but impossible to ignore. She asked about human battles, and he told her stories. Not boasting, but simple accounts of survival. Times when humans were outnumbered yet won because they refused to stop fighting. Times when they were wounded yet still pressed forward. Adapt, Marcus said. That's what we do best. Doesn't matter if we're weak or strong, armed, or barehanded, we adapt, we find a way. Kaylee thought of him asleep, unarmed, completely vulnerable. Was that adaptation too? To lower defenses, to rest fully, to recover strength? It was a thought that her people would consider madness. Yet Marcus made it sound like wisdom. That evening, Kaylee returned to her quarters and tried to sleep. But her body refused. She kept imagining herself lying as Marcus had, unarmored, unguarded, trusting the walls to protect her. Every instinct screamed against it. Yet part of her wondered, if humans could survive like this, perhaps they were stronger than her people ever realized. The next day she sought him again. This time in the mess hall, where humans gathered for meals. Marcus sat with his fellow soldiers, laughing at some joke Kaylee could not understand. But when he noticed her, he waved her over. She hesitated, but curiosity won again. She sat across from him, ignoring the strange looks of the others. You're braver than most, Vayari. I've met, Marcus said. Brave? She echoed. Yeah. Most of your people stick together, keep distance from us. You? You sit with humans, ask questions, walk into wrong rooms. He smirked. You're either curious or reckless. Kaylee lowered her gaze. Perhaps both. They spoke again, this time of smaller things. Human food, human songs, human games. He explained why they laughed so often, even in dangerous places. Laughter, he said, is how we remind ourselves we're still alive. Kaylee had no answer. Her people rarely laughed. Joy was private, hidden. To share it openly was considered careless. Yet humans wore their joy like armor, carrying it into battle as if it gave them strength. As days passed, Kaylee found herself drawn to Marcus again and again. Not because she fully understood him, but because she did not. Every word he spoke challenged her beliefs. Every action he took showed her a kind of strength she could not explain. One evening, after a long discussion, Kaylee finally asked the question that had haunted her since that first night. "Why were you not afraid?" Marcus tilted his head. "When? When I walked into your chamber. You did not know me. You did not know my intent. Yet you were calm." Marcus leaned back, thoughtful. "Because fear doesn't control me. I've faced enough battles to know that if something happens, I'll fight. Until then, I'd rather save my strength. That's the difference, Kaylee. We don't live waiting for death. We live for life." His words struck her harder than any weapon. We live for life. Her people lived to avoid death. Humans lived to embrace life. That was the difference. And in that moment, Kaylee began to see why the galaxy feared them. That night, she returned to her quarters with a new weight in her chest. For the first time, she lay down and removed her protective layer. The walls felt strange, the air too open, the silence too heavy. Her instincts screamed that she was exposed, weak, foolish. But she thought of Marcus, calm, steady, fearless. She closed her eyes, and though her sleep was uneasy, it was the first time she had ever tried to rest as a human did, unguarded, vulnerable, but strangely strong. The starship Resolute Dawn drifted through the quiet stretch of space, its lights shining against the dark void. To Kaylee, the human vessel always seemed alive. The steady pulse of its engines, the rhythm of footsteps in its halls, the voices echoing in the mess chamber. It was like a creature breathing strong and steady. But even strong creatures could bleed. Kaylee had just finished another long conversation with Marcus in the observation deck. He had been telling her about Earth's oceans, vast waters so endless that no eye could see their farthest edge. She had listened with wide eyes, imagining waves crashing like thunder, water moving with the power of storms. Her people had never known oceans. Their homeworld was dry, harsh, with rivers as thin as silver threads. "You would like the sea," Marcus had told her with a grin. "It teaches you respect. No one can fight the ocean. You can only ride its strength." She had wanted to ask more. But then the alarms blared. A sharp howl, deep and metallic, filled every corridor of the ship. Lights flashed red. The walls shook as if struck by a giant's hand. Kaylee's chest tightened. She had trained for danger, but the suddenness of the alarm sent fear racing through her veins. Marcus reacted instantly. His relaxed smile vanished, replaced by sharp focus. "Stay close to me," he said, already moving toward the exit. Kaylee followed, her legs shaking. Around them, humans rushed in every direction. Soldiers grabbed weapons from lockers. Officers shouted orders through comms. The calm ship she had come to know had turned into a battlefield within heartbeats. The corridors vibrated as distant. Impacts shook the hull. Kaylee stumbled, pressing against the wall to steady herself. "What is happening?" she cried. "Boarding attempt," Marcus answered, his voice firm but steady. "Raiders must have been trailing us. They're trying to cut through." "Boarding? Here?" Kaylee's mind reeled. The ship was powerful, protected by shields and weapons. Who would dare? "Desperate people," Marcus said. "Or foolish ones. Doesn't matter. We'll handle it." His certainty struck her again. Even as alarms wailed and the ship trembled, he walked as though this was no more than a storm he had weathered before. They reached a junction where human soldiers were gathering. Marcus picked up a rifle from the rack, but then looked at Kaylee. "Do you have weapons training?" Kaylee hesitated. She had learned the basics on her home world. Every Vayari child did. But in this moment, the thought of fighting aboard this chaotic human ship made her stomach twist. "Yes," she admitted softly. Marcus nodded. He handed her a smaller weapon, sleek and simple. "Stay behind me. Aim only if you must. Don't freeze." She gripped the weapon with trembling hands. The soldiers moved together, their steps fast but organized. Humans shouted to one another, short words full of meaning she did not fully understand. They flowed through the corridors like a single body, covering each other, scanning corners, advancing with purpose. Kaylee tried to keep up, her heart pounding. The first clash came quickly. A section of the corridor exploded with sparks as the raiders cut through. Metal walls split and smoke poured out. Dark figures leapt inside, tall, armored weapons flashing red. Kaylee froze. Raiders. She had seen them before, only from a distance, bands of violent scavengers who roamed the stars, taking what they wished. Their reputation was terror itself. But the humans did not freeze. Marcus shouted a command and fire erupted. The corridor filled with light and sound as human rifles blazed. The raiders fired back, their weapons searing the air. The walls shook with impact. Kaylee pressed herself to the wall, clutching the weapon but unable to raise it. Fear bound her limbs, and then she saw Marcus. He moved like water. One moment he was beside her, the next he had stepped forward, firing with precision. His shots struck true, forcing the raiders back. When their fire scorched toward him, he ducked low, rolled to the side, and used a piece of fallen paneling as cover. Kaylee could barely follow his movements. His body seemed to flow with instinct, not hesitation. When his rifle clicked empty, he didn't pause. He swung it like a club, striking a raider who had rushed forward. Then, dropping the weapon, he seized a metal bar from the broken wall and used it to parry another attack. Improvised. Adapted. Survived. Kaylee's breath caught. This was the same man who had once slept defenseless. And yet here, in the heart of battle, he was unstoppable. The raiders pressed hard, but the humans pressed harder. Their unity was like nothing Kaylee had seen. They shouted to one another, covered each other's movements, dragged the wounded back, and kept advancing. Where one fell, another filled the gap, and Marcus was at the center of it all, not commanding with rank but with presence. His courage spread like fire. Even when sparks burned his arm, he fought without pause. Even when smoke choked the corridor, he kept moving forward. Kaylee's fear began to shift. Her hands still trembled, but she raised the weapon and fired once. The shot struck a raider's armor, forcing him back. Her chest surged with a strange feeling, fear mixed with pride. After what felt like hours, though it could only have been minutes, the corridor fell silent. Raider bodies lay scattered. Smoke rose from walls torn open. Human soldiers stood breathing hard, some wounded, some carrying the injured away. Marcus lowered his makeshift weapon, his chest heaving. Sweat streaked his face, but his eyes burned, with steady fire. Kaylee stared at him, unable to speak. He noticed her gaze and gave a small smile, as if this chaos had been nothing. "You did well. You didn't freeze completely." Kaylee's mouth opened, but only one word escaped. "How?" Marcus frowned slightly. "How what? How can you fight like that? You had no armor. Your weapon broke. You picked up scraps of metal, and yet you still won." Marcus wiped his forehead. "Because you use what you have. Doesn't matter if it's a gun, a stick, or your fists. What matters is not stopping. Not stopping." The words echoed in her mind. They moved on, securing more corridors. Kaylee followed, her fear still present, but now mixed with awe. Each clash showed her more of what humans were: resilient, unyielding, dangerous even when cornered. At one point, Marcus caught her arm as a blast nearly struck her. He pulled her down, shielding her with his own body. The bolt struck the wall above them, scorching metal. Kaylee's heart raced, not only from fear but from shock. He had risked himself for her without hesitation. "Stay sharp," he said firmly, eyes locked on hers. "Fear is fine. Freezing is not. Understand?" She nodded quickly, her throat dry. Hours later, the alarms faded. The last of the raiders had been driven off, their ships retreating into the void. The Resolute Dawn limped with damage, but it lived. In the aftermath, humans moved quickly to repair, tend the wounded, and secure the ship. Their energy did not fade. They worked as if survival was not just instinct, but a choice. Kaylee sat on a bench in the medical bay, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had not fought much, only fired a few shots, but her mind felt heavy with all she had seen. Marcus entered, his arm wrapped in a bandage, but his step steady. He sat beside her. "You did better than most on their first fight," he said quietly. Kaylee shook her head. "I froze. I was afraid." "So was I," Marcus said simply. She blinked, staring at him. "I'm always afraid," he admitted. "Anyone who says they're not is lying. The difference is I don't let fear decide. I decide." Kaylee's chest tightened. She remembered him asleep unguarded. She remembered him fighting with nothing but scraps. And now she realized the truth. Humans were not fearless. They were stronger because they were afraid. And still, acted that night when she finally returned to her quarters, Kaylee could not rest. She sat in silence, replaying the battle again and again. The image of Marcus standing in smoke, weapon broken, still fighting, burned in her mind. Her people had always believed that survival meant endless vigilance. But she had seen a different truth. Survival also meant trust, adaptation, courage. And for the first time, she understood why the galaxy whispered that humans were the most dangerous species of all. Not because they were unbreakable, but because even broken, they refused to stop. The hum of the ship felt different now. Kaylee walked slowly through the repaired corridors of the Resolute Dawn, her silver eyes scanning the patches of welded metal and the scorch marks that still scarred the walls. The raider attack had ended, but the memory of it clung to the air like smoke that refused to fade. Humans worked tirelessly, welding, repairing circuits, carrying supplies. Everywhere she looked, there was motion. Her people, the Veyari, would have withdrawn after such an attack. They would have sealed themselves in safe chambers, whispered about the danger and prepared to flee if the raiders returned. But the humans did not withdraw. They pressed forward. They fixed what was broken. They carried the wounded with care. They even laughed as they worked, sharing jokes in between sparks of welding fire. To Kaylee, it was both confusing and astonishing. She found Marcus in the hangar, helping lift a heavy crate onto a carrier. His arm was still bandaged, but he moved, as if the injury meant nothing. When he saw her, he waved with a grin. "You came to see if I'm still alive?" he teased. Kaylee's lips pressed tightly together. She still struggled with human humor, but part of her had begun to expect it from him. "I came to understand," she said carefully. Marcus tilted his head. "Understand what? You fought as if fear was nothing. You trusted yourself with no armor, no weapon, no protection. You even trusted me, though I could have betrayed you. I do not understand this." Marcus placed the crate down and leaned against it, his expression softening. "Sit with me. I'll explain." Kaylee hesitated, then lowered herself onto a smaller crate across from him. For a long moment, Marcus was silent, his eyes studying the busy hangar. Then he spoke. "You think humans don't fear, Kaylee, but that's not true. We fear plenty of things. Death, loss, failure. Every time we go into battle, we're afraid." Kaylee frowned. "Then how do you fight?" "Fear weakens the body. It slows the mind." Marcus shook his head. "Not always. Fear can sharpen us. It tells us what's at stake. It makes us act fast. The trick is simple. Don't let fear control you. Use it." Kaylee's breath caught. Use fear? To her people, fear was a poison. They spent their lives avoiding it, guarding against it, never letting it touch them. But Marcus spoke as if fear was not poison, but fuel. He leaned forward. "When you saw me sleeping, you thought I was weak, right?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I wasn't weak," Marcus continued. "I was strong enough to trust the walls, the crew, and myself. I knew if danger came, I'd rise. That's the strength of humans. We can let ourselves rest because we know we'll get back up when needed." Kaylee lowered her gaze. "My people, we never rest like this. We never trust. We live with fear in every breath. To us, that is survival." "And it worked," Marcus said gently. "You're still here. Your people are still alive. But ask yourself this. Are you living or just surviving?" The question hit her harder than any weapon. Living, surviving. She had never separated the two. To a Veyari, they were the same. Survival was the only purpose. But humans seemed to carry another fire. They did not only endure, they lived. Kaylee remembered the way the humans had laughed while repairing the ship. Even with danger fresh in their minds, she remembered Marcus risking himself to protect her. Not because of duty, but because of choice. She remembered the calmness in his eyes when he had awoken to find her standing over him. Something stirred inside her chest, sharp and unfamiliar. Later, that cycle, Kaylee returned to her quarters and activated the small communicator to record her personal log. Her people had ordered her to keep careful notes of her time with humans, but what she said now was not for them, it was for herself. "Today," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly, "I saw humans fight without fear of weakness. I saw them adapt when weapons failed. I saw them laugh while bleeding. I do not understand how a species can live like this, and yet, I wish I could." She stopped recording, her hands trembling. The following day, Kaylee sought Marcus again. She found him in the observation deck, staring at the endless stars. He looked tired, but his posture was still strong. "Marcus," she began softly, "how do you keep rising? Even when you are wounded, even when fear is heavy, how do you continue?" He glanced at her, then back at the stars. "Because we don't believe in staying down. On Earth, we learned it the hard way. Disasters, wars, storms. We were knocked down again and again. But every time we rose. It became part of who we are. We don't win because we're the strongest. We win because we refuse to stay broken." His voice carried no boast, it was simple truth. Kaylee's chest tightened. "If you fall 1,000 times, we rise 1,001. Marcus finished with a faint smile. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the ship. Kaylee's thoughts raced. Her people believed that once broken, a warrior was useless. That once trust was betrayed, it could never return. That once weakness showed, it marked you forever. But humans broke and rose. They trusted and were betrayed, yet trusted again. They showed weakness, yet turned it into strength. Kaylee looked at Marcus and felt the truth settle like a heavy weight in her heart. Her people had survived by fear. But if they could learn what humans carried, they might not only survive, they might truly live. That evening, Marcus surprised her by asking a question of his own. "Kaylee, do you ever wish things were different for your people?" She blinked, startled. "Different? How?" He shrugged. "Less fear. More trust. More life." Kaylee's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to defend her culture, but the words would not come. She had already begun to taste the truth. "Yes," she admitted softly. "Sometimes I wish." Marcus gave her a warm smile. "Then maybe you'll be the one to start the change." Kaylee's eyes widened. "Me? I am no leader." "Leaders aren't always the ones with titles," Marcus said. "Sometimes they're just the ones who see a better way and choose to walk it." That night, Kaylee lay in her bed with no armor, no protective shield. For the first time, she tried to let herself sleep fully. Fear clawed at her, whispering of danger. But she thought of Marcus's words. Trust, rise, live. She closed her eyes. Her sleep was restless, but it was real. And when she awoke, she felt something new. A spark of strength she had never known. The next days blurred together as repairs continued. Kaylee spent more time with Marcus, learning human ways. She watched them share meals, laugh at jokes she didn't understand, sing songs that carried hope even in sorrow. Each moment revealed something about them, their resilience, their stubbornness, their unbreakable will. One day she found Marcus teaching younger soldiers hand-to-hand combat. He moved with patience, correcting their stances, showing them how to fight even when disarmed. "You don't need the perfect weapon," he told them. "You are the weapon." The words echoed in Kaylee's heart. One evening, she finally spoke. The thought she had been holding. "Marcus," she said quietly, "my people believe showing weakness leads to death. But I think now, showing weakness might be a kind of strength. Because it means you trust enough to rise again." Marcus's eyes softened, and he gave her a small nod. "That's the idea. Vulnerability doesn't make you weaker. It makes you human. Or maybe, it makes you alive." Kaylee felt her chest tighten again, but this time with something warmer than fear. For the first time, she understood. And so Kaylee began to change. She started small. She laughed once, quietly, when a human told her a story about a training accident. The sound felt strange in her throat, but it brought smiles from those around her. She joined humans at their meals more often, even sharing food with Marcus. She even trained with him, letting herself stumble, letting herself fail, and learning that failure was not the end. The Vayari envoy who had walked into a human's room by mistake was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who had seen another way to live. And in her heart, Kaylee knew. When she returned to her people, she would not tell them of weakness. She would tell them of strength. Strength found not in fear, but in trust, in laughter, in rising again and again. Strength found in humans. Kaylee's shuttle hummed softly as it left the resolute dawn, carrying her away from the human starship that had changed her life. Outside, stars stretched endlessly, black and infinite, yet she felt less alone than she had ever felt on her homeworld. Far, past cycles of training, conversation, and chaos replayed in her mind. The human soldier, Marcus Hale, had been her teacher in ways no Vayari mentor ever could have been. He had shown her strength in vulnerability, courage in fear, and trust in times of danger. She held her notes close, words written in careful script, for the elders of her people. But she knew she could not simply give them the report she had been instructed to write. This was bigger than facts, bigger than protocol. This was a truth that demanded attention. Humans were dangerous, not because of their weapons, ships, or numbers. Dangerous because they carried something no one else in the galaxy did. Resilience, born of trust, courage, born of vulnerability, strength, born of life itself. When Kaylee arrived at the Vayari capital, the city seemed smaller than she remembered. The high towers and silver walls once imposing felt rigid and cold. Her people moved with precision, faces sharp and serious, always alert. She remembered the stories her elders had told of humans, reckless, soft, unpredictable, dangerous, but in a way her people feared, not respected. She strode into the assembly chamber, her notes in hand. The room was full of elders, leaders, and warriors. Their eyes, sharp and silver, watched her with suspicion. "Kaylee," the high elder said, his voice like ice. "Report your observations. Did the humans prove themselves as our allies?" Kaylee took a deep breath. She could tell them the usual, their weapons, their ships, their numbers. But that would not capture the truth. She began differently. "Humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy," she said calmly. Every head turned toward her, some leaning forward, others narrowing their eyes. The high elder raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous? Explain." Kaylee's gaze swept the room. "Not because of their weapons or their ships or their physical strength. They are dangerous because of what lies within them. They survive through fear, yes, but they do not let fear rule them. They fight when weak, rise when wounded, trust when betrayed, and they live fully even in the face of death." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some elders leaned back, incredulous. Others whispered to their neighbors. Kaylee's words were bold, perhaps even shocking. She recounted the events of the attack on the Resolute Dawn in detail, but always focused on the humans themselves. She described Marcus Hale, a soldier who had slept defenseless, who had fought with nothing but a broken weapon and scraps of metal, who had adapted instantly to every threat. And yet, Kaylee said, he was never reckless. He was never careless. He simply trusted. And because of that trust, he survived, and so did the others. A younger warrior raised a hand. "Are you saying humans fight without caution?" "No," Kaylee replied firmly. "They fight with caution. They plan. They watch, but they do not let fear stop them. That is the difference. They do not survive by avoiding danger. They survive by meeting it fully, and trusting they can rise no matter what happens." The elders were silent. They were listening now. Kaylee continued. She told them about laughter in the halls, songs, shared even after a battle, and humans tending to the wounded with care yet still laughing at small jokes. She described the moments of quiet reflection she had shared with Marcus, and the philosophy he had shared, that life itself was the greatest weapon a human carried. "Your people teach that weakness invites death," Kaylee said, her voice soft, but strong. "Humans teach that weakness is not failure. It is opportunity. Opportunity to recover, to learn, to rise again, to live." The chamber was still. Some elders shifted in their seats, unwilling to believe her. Some looked at one, another doubt flickering in their eyes. But Kaylee saw that a few faces were different. They were thoughtful, perhaps even inspired. And that, Kaylee concluded, is why humans are dangerous, not because they cannot be defeated, but because they cannot be broken. Even when they appear vulnerable, they carry strength that cannot be measured by armor, weapons, or shields. They carry it within themselves, and that is something we Vayari have never truly understood. Silence followed her words. The High Elder's expression was unreadable. Finally he spoke. You speak boldly, Kaylee. You claim that humans surpass us in resilience and courage? I do, Kaylee said. And I do not say this lightly. I have seen it. I have witnessed it. And it has changed me. The chamber remained quiet for a long moment. Then, one of the older warriors spoke. If what you say is true, then perhaps we have been wrong. Perhaps survival alone is not enough. Perhaps life itself must be embraced. Kaylee nodded. Yes, we can survive, or we can truly live. Humans choose the latter, and it is why they are feared, and why they are respected. The High Elder leaned back, considering her words. His gaze softened slightly. Then you have not only observed humans, you have learned from them. I have, Kaylee said simply. The next days were filled with discussions and debates. Kaylee shared her lessons with other envoys, training officers, and even children of the Vayari elite. Slowly, her words began to take root. You speak of trust, as strength, a young warrior said. And courage without armor? Yes, Kaylee replied. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is action despite fear. Trust is not weakness, it is a declaration of strength. Humans teach us that the spirit itself is a weapon, more powerful than any steel. Kaylee could feel change in the air. Some elders still resisted, unwilling to admit that their doctrines of fear might be incomplete. But others were listening. A few had begun to question the rigid rules they had lived by for centuries. Kaylee thought of Marcus and smiled softly. He would have found it amusing that his small acts of trust, laughter, and courage were shaking centuries of Vayari tradition. Weeks later, Kaylee received a message from the resolute Dawn. Marcus's voice came through the communicator, warm and steady. You've returned to your people, Kaylee. How are they taking it? She smiled. Slowly. But they are listening. I have never seen them so quiet. Thinking. That's all you need, Marcus said. If they think differently, even for a moment, it changes everything. Kaylee nodded. You changed me. Not only by your actions, but by your philosophy. You made me see that life itself is more powerful than fear. There was a pause. Then, Marcus said quietly, and you've shown that even one Vayari can change a world. Her chest swelled with warmth. I hope so. I hope my people learn what I have learned. The Vayari began to implement small changes. Training now included exercises in trust. Warriors practiced improvisation, not just precision. Elders allowed children to speak freely, to explore, and to laugh even in serious moments. Kaylee watched it all with quiet satisfaction. Change was slow, but it had begun. And in her heart, she carried the memory of Marcus, the human who slept naked and unafraid, who fought like fire, who lived like life itself, and who taught her that strength came from within. As weeks turned, to cycles, Kaylee returned to the stars, not aboard her shuttle this time, but in a joint mission with human allies. She saw the resolute Dawn again, gliding through the void. She felt no fear, only respect and a strange kinship. Humans were dangerous, yes, but dangerous in the best way. Dangerous because they were alive, fully, utterly, and without apology. And Kaylee knew she would carry this lesson forever. For her people, for the galaxy, and for herself. The galaxy had changed, not because humans conquered it with weapons, or because they dominated with numbers, but because they carried a truth no species could defeat, to trust, to rise, and to live fully, even when naked, even when vulnerable, even when the odds seemed impossible. Kaylee smiled as the stars stretched before her. The humans were not just allies, they were teachers, warriors, and the brightest example of what it meant to be alive, and She, a Vayari envoy, would make sure the galaxy never forgot it.